Hi, everyone. I think we're here. I think we're ready to go. I am Dawn Knight. I'm an English teacher at Westfield High School in Westfield, Indiana, but you probably don't care because you're much more interested in the person you see next to me, our special guest today, Tony Hale, an Emmy
Hi, guys.
Award-winning actor, producer, and author.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Isn't this weird?
It
I
is.
can't see any of you. I see Dawn, but I can't see any of you. I hope everybody has a fantastic snack in front of them. I hope you're enjoying it. I don't. I just have water. Boring.
Well, let's get started. I have some questions for you, if that's okay.
Great.
Well, a lot of us are familiar with your characters in Veep and Arrested Development, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career.
Yeah. So first of all, I love doing this. Love talking to everybody, even though I can't see anybody, which is so surreal to me. I love that this Zoom even has a waiting room. I think that's fascinating. So a little bit about myself. I am from Tallahassee, Florida, and I did not study acting in college. After college, I kind of thought I wanted to dip my toe back into acting because I acted a lot when I was little. And I moved to New York and started doing commercials. I was always seen as the quirky guy who wasn't all there. That was my type, and that hasn't changed pretty much in my work. But I did that in New York. I met my wife in New York. I did a lot of theater and many odd jobs. Moved to LA with Arrested Development. That brought me out in 2003. And then we've been here ever since. And I guess I've been in this business for over 20 years, which is crazy. Been really fortunate to have some great gigs. I loved my time on Veep and Arrested. I've been able to do some movies, and also I'll talk a little bit later about this children's show I do, Archibald's Next Big Thing, which gives me a tremendous amount of joy doing it.
Great. Well, let's get into some of the things that I think some of our AP Lang kids can relate to. One
Oh,
of the
okay.
one of the things we have them do is they interact a lot with passages, whether they're from short stories or
Hmm.
essays or journals, poems, and letters even. And typically, the first thing they do is just kind of interact with and figure out, speaker, audience, purpose. And I kind of wondered how you process when you first get a script in front of you. What is your process for interacting with that?
Yeah, so I always get sent I'll get sent a script and just to kind of see if I'm interested in it. And as I look over it, I think mainly maybe just to kind of try to find obviously what the story is about, and kind of you can kind of get a sense from the writing what the tone is. Obviously, if it's a comedy I'm reading, is the comedy very broad? Is it subtle? Is it and then if it's something that I am interested in, the big thing is I love to have a conversation with the writer, or the director, and just kind of talk about. I always like asking the question, like, why did you write this? Where is this coming from? Because there's a lot of, it really helps the actor, at least it helps me to really know why did you want to start this? Because it gives me a new motivation of what I'm entering into and kind of the passion behind it. And so I love asking those questions of like, but also why specifically, why did you want to put this message out there? Just kind of really kind of find the world building of why it came about, because it really helps me just kind of knowing when I hear where they're coming from, kind of knowing the world that I'm entering into. So it's a big gift to kind of hear that from the writer or the director. Many times when the director is both the writer and the director.
That's great. Are you guys hearing that? That is the rhetorical situation that he just talked about. I love it. So the interaction between all of those things and the exigence that prompted it to happen to begin with. So go ahead.
And in terms of,
Yeah.
well, in terms of kind of like, in terms of kind of the character itself, like um, if it's something that I am interested in, and after kind of having this conversation, if they're interested in me, kind of diving into the character is really the really fun process. Because, for instance, the way I see it, I have to have, I feel like each actor needs to have some kind of a connection with the character. I think you can actually find a connection with any character, and you need to find that connection in order to give the most authentic performance. For example, years ago, I was doing this movie, and the character was he was kind of a jerk, and he kind of was entitled. And I remember reading this character and being like, ugh, I can't stand people like this. I just don't like people like this. And I went to this acting coach, and I was talking about kind of this process, this kind of these feelings I'm having. And she says, Tony, you have to realize that this character is inside of you. And the fact is, she's absolutely right, because there have been days in my life that I've been a jerk. There are times in my life I'm not proud of, that I've been a bit entitled. And the more that I can resonate with these characters and I can find parts of them in myself, then I can give the most authentic performance. And also for writers out there, the more that you can, when you're writing a character, the more that you can find that connection within yourself, within the character, I feel like you write the character with a lot more depth and layers and compassion. Because everybody, even if it's like a very, very evil character, you have to find those different layers, because then you can find, wait, why are they evil? Where did this brokenness come from? And so you find more of a humanity in these characters when I'm playing them and when you're writing them. And honestly, I feel like acting and writing then becomes an act of empathy, which actually is a great lesson in general for all of us. You know, I think about, if I can think of somebody off the top of my head who I can't stand, okay? I think about that person, I think, oh gosh, they're arrogant, you know, they've said things I don't like, all this kind of stuff. Guys, if I'm honest with myself, I've said things I'm not proud of. I've had moments in my life that I'm arrogant. And that way, then I'm coming from more of a place of empathy rather than judgment. And so both acting and writing can really be a beautiful act of empathy if you kind of begin to look at it from that direction, if that makes sense.
I love that. And I know that reading, there are numerous studies that show that reading makes us more empathetic. And I think that's so
Mm,
important. And a couple of things you were saying, we actually talked a couple of different times about shades of gray when we talk about arguments and how the world's not really just black and white. And that really kind of
mhm,
reminded me of that when you were saying that. It's not just you're a bad person or you're a good person. There are all these
mhm,
different shades in between.
mhm.
Um, did you want to talk any more about the role that empathy plays in acting, writing, reading, any of those things before we?
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a, I think the big thing with acting with empathy that I really appreciate, and I would even say writing, is, say for instance, someone comes to me and I don't know, they want me to play a coach or something like that, say like a coach of something or a football coach or whatever. My immediate thinking is like, I'm not going to get cast as that. Okay. But the fact is, if I think about a coach, and I think about a coach being motivational, he inspires, he encourages. If I bring that out in myself and I put that on the table in the audition, yeah, I might not get the part, but they're not going to see anybody else doing it like me because I brought it out of myself. If I think of a coach in my head, of an idea of a coach, like for instance the guy in Friday Night Lights, if I just play an idea of what I think a football coach is, I'm telling you right now, there's thousands of other people who can play that part much better than me to play that idea. But if I bring out those traits in myself, or as if when you're writing, if you try to bring out those places in yourself, the fact is, for me, I might not get the part, but I'm going to have put out the representation that is the most honest and the most authentic by just finding that empathy and resonating with those certain aspects, if that makes sense. So it makes it the most unique when you try to do that.
Yeah, and in the world, why do you think empathy is an important skill to have in general?
I mean, I think it's unbelievably necessary. Um, I mean, just we're an incredibly divisive country. Nobody is listening to each other, and all we're doing is saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, I'm right. And if we begin to find connections, find similarities in each other. I'm not saying you can't have your stance and you can't have your platform, but at least there's bridges being built of communication. Because I can say, hey, I'm not, I mean, I sound like a Hallmark card now, but it's like now, but I'm saying, hey, I'm not different from you in being passionate about this subject. Hey, I'm not different in you in the fact that we're both fathers and we both love our families. And we, but it's like, let's try to find these common grounds and try to be empathetic to each other's character. That way we can be two people coming together with similarities and we can have a conversation. We might still leave there in disagreement, but at least we're communicating, and it's very necessary.
Love that. Can you tell us a little bit more about another project of yours, Archibald?
Oh yeah. So Archibald, I love me some Archibald. Okay, so years ago when I booked Arrested Development, getting a sitcom was like my big thing. That was my dream, and I got that dream, and it didn't satisfy me the way I thought it was going to satisfy me, and it really scared me. And what had happened was my whole life I had looked to this big thing as like, oh, that's coming. And the fact is I gave it too much weight, because what was happening is if you're not practicing contentment where you are, you're not going to be content when you get what you want. And I had not been, for most of my life, been very present. I'd always just been looking so far ahead all the time. And so the book is called Archibald's Next Big Thing. And what happens is he gets a card in the mail, this chicken with this little brown corduroy sweater. He gets a card in the mail that says, your big thing is here. And he's like, where? And he goes on all these adventures. But every time he's on an adventure, he's like, I got to get to my next big thing. I got to get to my next big thing. And this bee comes along, and the bee's like, hey, you got to just be, man. You got to just be. And then in the end, he realizes that the card is right, that your big thing is right here. My big thing right now is talking to you guys. That's my big thing. And so it really, this whole process of writing this book came from my own story and my own struggle with being present. And then now it kind of became this cartoon on Netflix. And now Archibald, this chicken, he sees everything like it's a big thing. And not only does he see everything like it's a big thing, but he sees the best in everyone, or at least tries to see the best in everyone and the best in every situation. That's something I don't do. And so this chicken, this skinny chicken with a brown sweater has become my role model fully.
I love this so much. Yeah. That's great. That's wonderful. Another quick question, getting back to our empathy a little bit. Dan sent me a question. So we want to know if you've ever had to read something on the fly the way these kids do, where it's a timed situation, like in an if you're in a situation where you're rehearsing or something and somebody gives you a change, or you're in front of so have you ever had to read something in a really quick time constraint, and how do you deal with that?
Oh, totally, 100%. And actually on Veep we would be doing a scene, and they would just be handing us new pages and line changes in the middle of the scene, and you just kind of have to go with it. And honestly, what I'm very thankful for is the time spent on knowing enough about the world and knowing enough about the character and knowing enough about my role to Selena Meyer, who was played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. So when new lines came, I thankfully had enough of a foundation that I could easily roll with it. The challenge is when you haven't done the work to where you don't have a strong enough foundation, and then it's really hard to kind of get into it. Now, the other side of it is since I do know enough about the foundation, if a new line is given to me or new something, if it feels jarring to me, if it feels like something, wait, I don't feel like my character would say something like this, it makes so much more sense when you're communicating it to the writer, because I really know the world that my character is in. And I know, I don't know if he would be that abrupt to Selena. I don't know. It seems a little too bold for my character to say something like this. And then the writer would be like, oh my gosh, I totally get what you're saying, because I knew enough about the world that I was in. Now, in contrast to that, there's been many times I haven't done my work. I'm not proud of it. And so I really have to work extra hard in those moments to be like, would I say that? Would I not say that?
Mhm.
Rather than I should have done the work and really put the time in.
Absolutely. Love it. Okay, so the students who we're talking to are probably sophomores, juniors, or seniors. And
Mm,
as a teacher myself who interacts with them all the time, I know that as a general rule, a lot of them have a lot of stress in their lives.
mm,
Um,
mm,
even before the pandemic happened, this is a
mm,
time when they're making huge decisions. They're
mm,
bombarded daily with a lot of bad news, social media. They're kind of comparing themselves to other people's highlight reels. They're just all these
mm.
things that cause, I think, a lot of anxiety in this group. And I was wondering, as an actor, you're no stranger to challenges and stress. And I just wondered if you had any advice for them.
Mm. First of all, I love that question. I love that we're talking about it. I've struggled with anxiety for most of my life. There's a reason that I've played very anxious characters. It's something that I can easily resonate with. And also, just especially in this season we're in right now, it is overwhelming, and there's a lot of concerns and feelings that come and go in our minds and our bodies. And just to kind of give you the allowance of, hey, that's everybody's experiencing that, where it's very normal to have all those feelings right now. In terms of kind of anxiety when it comes to these big decisions, I totally get that. I would say, for advice, something that I have really had a lot of therapy on, and I'm very thankful to have that therapy. But many times, what was happening to me with my anxiety is I felt like I was a victim to my thoughts and my feelings. So I felt like I was bombarded by all of these negative thoughts and these negative feelings. And over time, really learned how to become more of an observer to these thoughts and feelings. So, for instance, if I had a thought of, oh my gosh, I'm never going to work again, and my body just started to kind of get overwhelmed, I learned to more and more be like, you know what, be more of an observer, to where I would go, you know what, there's that thought that I'm never going to work again. There's that feeling that I'm never going to work again. And you learn to look at them like cars on a highway, just going by, just going by. So rather than identifying with every single thought and every single feeling, it's like you just learn like you're looking at a movie screen, and you can say, yeah, like for instance, if you guys are sophomores and juniors, if you have these daunting, overwhelming feelings, you can say, if you get kind of overwhelmed, you can say, oh yeah, there's that thought that I'm not going to find the right school. There's that feeling that I'm not going to pass this test and everything's going to fall apart. So what you're doing is you're not owning these feelings and thoughts as much, because the fact is we can't control these thoughts and feelings. They're going to come and go. What we can do is we can almost be more of an observer, and we can kind of set them apart of ourselves, because you are not identified by those feelings. They just come and go. That would be one thing. Another thing that I've really gotten in good practice with is, many times, and we all do this, is you kind of live in the what if, where it's like, oh my gosh, what if I don't get in the right school? What if this happens? And you start creating these big narratives, these big fearful narratives in your head, and it gets so overwhelming. And what I've learned to do is, when all of these what ifs come in your mind, when that happens, I just say, not now. And many times I have to say that out loud. I just have to say, not now. And what that does is, you're not necessarily controlling the thought or the feeling, but there's something about verbally speaking out, not now, which brings you back to where you are. And so many times I'll do that throughout the day. I'll find my mind going into these what ifs, and I'll just say, not now. Right now, I'm having this great conversation with Dawn and who knows how many people. And that's where I am right now. And many times, to ground myself in that, I have to maybe touch the table around me, or I have to touch my sweater or something, just to kind of bring me back to where I am. So that's probably a big thing I would do. And also, just be a lot more kind to yourself, because you guys are in situations. I remember those times looking for schools, and it can be very, very scary and very overwhelming. But the fact is, we all take it day to day. We're in everybody's in a situation right now where we're all taking it day to day. We're all in the same boat. And so just to kind of be a lot more kind to yourself, because it is going to be okay, but you got to give yourself a lot more grace, a lot more grace.
I couldn't agree more. I wish you had told me that when I was in high school, because I wasn't kind to myself and I dealt with a lot of anxiety also. And I think that those pieces of advice are so important. The idea that stressing about something and doing those what if scenarios aren't going to change anything,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
they're just getting you down that wormhole. And so I love the way that talking about it as the car's going by and saying not now and just being kind to yourselves. And I hope you guys are all hearing this. Be kind to yourselves.
Yeah, and just to add, I mean, the reason I talk about this so much is because I'm not good at. This is something I have to work on daily, because I can find myself going into a false narrative in my head many times, and I have to say, you know what? Not now. Right now, I'm going to take it day to day. I'm going to ground myself where I am, and I'm going to keep walking, and that's all I can do.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think that is about it, but I wondered if you had any other closing thoughts or advice or anything, especially about students who maybe are thinking about a creative career choice.
Oh yeah. In terms of the creative career choice, I always encourage. I think many times when it comes, I can only speak from like TV or film kind of scenario, but I think many times it's easy to picture like New York or LA as kind of the meccas of where you need to go. I always encourage people to just try to grow where they're planted a little bit. Just like really kind of look around you and make the most of where you are, because there's something about the practice that you'll gain from where you are doing it more and more. Like, for instance, if you want to be an actor, do as much stage as you can. Try to get in front of a camera, because the more comfortable you are doing it where you are, then if it's your plan to move somewhere else, you'll be in a stronger, more confident, more honest place when you do it out there, rather than jumping right into it. And I would say, in general, before you jump into your career, really establish a community first when it comes to if you want to go into the creative arts, because there is a lot of rejection in my business, and it is my community that has given me longevity. People who see me beyond how the industry might see me. And in terms of your question of kind of what I would say to the students now, I know you guys are looking for schools. This sounds very hallmarky and hokey, but I just think it's really true. Know right now that your value is not getting in the best school or whatever it is. The value you have right now is tremendous. And it's the most value you're going to have. You getting into a new school or whatever the best school, that's not going to give you your value. You have tremendous value right where you are right now. And you have to remember that. That's key.
You said something about rejection there also, and I think that's another important thing, because I think at some point everybody experiences that, whether it's not getting into the school or not getting the job you want.
Mhm.
Any advice for dealing with rejection?
Yeah, I've been dealing with I mean, it's kind of a part of my job for over 20 years. And I think the more that I realize that many times it doesn't really have to do with me. It just has to do with, I mean, from an acting perspective, there's so many people out for this one part. And I might have just been too old. I might not have looked the part. I might have been too young. You have no idea. There's many other factors out of my control as to why I didn't get the part. So many times it has nothing to do with me. And so that's a different way to frame it for yourself. Of just like, there's so many other factors that go into something that you have no idea about. So if something were not to happen, realize, you know what, it's not it's probably has nothing to do with me personally. It's just the fact that there's so many other things going into it.
Absolutely. Before we say goodbye to you, I just want to let these guys know that when we do say goodbye to you, we're going to move on and just do a very quick warm up from Friday's AP exam practice so that you guys can get your feedback on that. And then we're not doing a lesson today, but we are going to do another AP exam practice. This is all about that foundation that Mr. Hale was just talking about, so that when you get to read on the fly, you know what you're doing and you're ready to go. So we'll keep doing that today, but it'll be a very short one. We'll just do the warm up and the exam practice, and that's all. All right, Mr.
Oh wait,
Hale. Yeah, no, please. Yeah.
Can I say one more thing? I
Yes.
was in addition to I want to wish Allison from New Jersey a happy 17th birthday. I heard it's her birthday. So happy birthday, Allison. But also I want to say, in terms of kind of this quarantine that we're all in, I think it is good to remember, just for those that are in school or they might be graduating or whatever, is that it's just to remember, I know it's overwhelming, but this is a very small chapter in the story of your life. I know it feels overwhelming, but it's like, it is a small chapter. You are going to get through this and your story will continue to unfold. But it's at this point, I know it feels crazy, but in the large story, you have a beautiful story coming, and this is just a little scene of it. So try not to give it too much power.
I love that. All right. Anything else you want to say?
I'm good. You guys are great. I can't see you all. It's
Yeah.
going to be okay. You guys are great.
Thank you
So nice meeting you,
so.
Dawn.
Oh, you too. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. We so appreciate it. Have a
Oh,
great
I
rest of
appreciate it
your
too.
Thanks,
day.
All
Tony.
right.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye. All right. If you guys will just give me 1 second, I'm going to share my screen with you here, and then we will, like I said, very quickly go through today's lesson, which isn't really a lesson. It's the warm up and the practice. Okay, so on Friday, hold on, I need to move some screens out of my way here. There we go. On Friday, you looked at selecting evidence, to use in the body paragraph for this particular claim. Finally, Queen Elizabeth encourages confidence in her leadership and inspires the troops to defend her kingdom by alluding to God. And once again, if you weren't here for Friday's lesson, this will still make sense to you. What they were doing here was practicing finding evidence to support a claim. So this is the claim. And the first step to do here is to really look at what are the key ideas in this claim or in this topic sentence. So if you look at what we've underlined here, there are a couple of different things. First of all, the rhetorical choice was allusions to God. And so you should have found 2 allusions to use to support your claim. But then you also want to make sure that these allusions supported all aspects of the claim, that she encourages confidence in her leadership and that she inspires the troops to defend her kingdom. So we want an allusion that does both of those things, and preferably 2 of them. Okay, so after locating some examples that might work, then you kind of consider the extent to which they prove all aspects. So if you look at the first one here, let tyrants fear. I have always so behaved myself that under God I have placed my chiefest strength in my loyal hearts and goodwill of my subjects. So this means that she believes she's guided by God, a superior being above her, watching how she behaves. And the allusion to God is mostly in reference to how she lives her life and what she believes in. But it doesn't do as much in terms of talking about encouraging confidence or inspiring troops. So let's look at another example. The second one, to lay down for my God and for my kingdom and my people, my honor and my blood, even in the dust. So this time she's willing to die for God, kingdom, and people and troops. The allusion here highlights that she would sacrifice herself for any of these, and that would probably inspire confidence in her troops and in her leadership. Because of her willingness to die for them, which could easily inspire them. So that one does a much better job. Let's look there. There we go. And then we shall shortly have a famous victory over those enemies of my God, of my kingdom, and of my people. And here again, um, we have the idea that she's equating God and her kingdom and her people, which would make them more confident in her leadership because they feel valued by her. The idea that using the word tyrant would inspire them to defend the kingdom because it means the enemy is terrible and must be defeated. So, those last two examples do a much better job of not just showing an allusion to God, but an allusion to God that supports the purpose of encouraging confidence in her leadership and inspiring her troops. Okay, so now let's look at today's exam practice. Since we didn't really get a chance to go through a lesson today on embedding evidence, which is basically doing what we just did, but then how to put that into the paragraph itself, I put together just a little workshop. I don't even know if I would call it a workshop. I called it a workshop, but it's just 4 steps that kind of take you through different ways to embed evidence in a paragraph. And then the fourth step is for you to practice what you learned through reading it. So you have this AP exam practice. It's in the link as usual in the video description. So you should be able to go through that and do that. And then tomorrow you'll actually do the warm up on that and see how you did. Okay, I think that's it for today. Thank you, as always, for watching. I'm so excited that we got the chance to talk to Tony Hale today. All right, have a great day. Don't forget to be kind to yourselves and find some joy. Stay active and stay healthy. Thanks.